Won't somebody think of the landlords? 12 properties and still putting out sob stories. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee because a viewer shared this article with me on Twitter and suggested it might make a good video. So let's have a look. And this is from 9 News, so it's a sob story, not from the ABC. You know, everyone has to get their side in. And here, Steve owns 12 properties and is swimming in debt. He says landlords are the other side of the rental crisis. Now, it's easy to bash the people who have gone all in property. But think about it. Can you blame them? We pay so much taxes. And for the average punter, properties and negative gearing is the easiest way of reducing that. And the government wants to incentivize people to invest in housing to provide more rental options to people around there. So, you know, I can appreciate why people are pushed in that direction. And, I mean, properties are a bit of a pain to manage. You've got to deal with people, you've got to deal with maintenance, and then people think, you know, going from one to the next, you know, that's the secret. I remember once the lockdowns and the hysteria was all happening and there was rent freezes and this, we had articles where teachers had bought 5 properties, interest-only loans, just one to the next, because they were saying that's the only way to get ahead in this country. And, I mean, there you go. So the government's found a smart way to get a whole bunch of people to provide low-cost, or not low-cost anymore, but housing for Aussies out there. And, well, this is the other side of it. I mean, is property investing, at least being a landlord, is it the smartest thing to do? I was talking to a physio the other day when I went in for treatment. We were discussing property, and he was sharing how he had to spend so much just refurbishing the kitchen and the bathroom and all these things to get tenants for his property. You know, put $100,000 in there and everyone's going evil, mean landlords, but it costs a lot of money to maintain this. And I go, well, yeah, I mean, think about it. What if you had to just put all that in our real estate investment trust and just sat on it and not worried about it? You don't need to do anything. You can liquidate it in an instant. You don't need to deal with the real estate agents or the landlords or the tenants, none of that stuff. So that's the other side of it too. So let's check this one out, because 12 properties, I mean, just sell a couple. If you've got a capital, you know, if you've made capital growth on some of these properties, which I'm sure you have, unless you bought all 12 recently, just sell a couple. There you go. Reduce your debt. So Steve owns 12 properties and is swimming in debt. He says landlords are the other side of the rental crisis. Well, yeah, this is how when people are thinking interest rates will go so high, landlords will be forced to sell. Maybe they won't be. They'll just up the rent as long as they can. For months, we've read stories about the cost of living crunch for renters and mortgage holders trying to pay off the family home as the pain of 10 straight interest rate hikes hit hard. But a landlord who has multiple mortgages on his 12 properties says his property portfolio has become unaffordable and wants to share the reality and consequences of the recent rate rises and how they are squeezing landlords. Steve, who doesn't want to be identified, is a retired businessman in his 70s who expected his dozen properties to fund his retirement in lieu of superannuation. I mean, that's a reasonable assumption to make. He's not making any, you know, crazy assumptions. He should be able to retire on the rental income from 12 properties. And, you know, properties are gold here in Australia. But how long when did he buy them? Did he just buy them recently? He's 70. Hasn't he had them for a while? We are really struggling financially, he told 9news.com.au. Well, then you got to sell some of the properties, mate. There's the answer. You got to sell some of the properties to reduce your debt burden. So, I mean, here we go. Look, there's the cash rate target. And that's a dramatized chart. Let's bring up the one from the RBA that I have here. It's not quite as dramatic as what we're seeing on 9 News. But I guess, you know, our memory only goes back 2 years. And rates were never going to go higher until 2024. And yeah, this is going to sting a lot of people. And it'll probably hit investors. Well, investors will be paying more because they're a higher risk than owner-occupiers. But anyway, let's jump back to this article here. So, the retiree has always been mindful of his tenants living in his properties, but told 9 News that he has to survive. Being a landlord is not an easy exercise, he said. Yeah, it isn't. It is not an easy exercise at all. I mean, remember seeing the stories about landlords who were doing worse than their tenants, or the whole rent vesting crowd? You know, when you're young and hip, the thing is buy a house out in the suburbs, because you wouldn't be dare seen there, and then pay a shitload to rent something in a city so you can be all hip and cool. Maybe I'm not the demo. I'm evolving into my boomer form. The decision to raise the rent in his properties weren't made easily, but said he has been left with no choice. The rate rise is absolutely killing us, Steve said. One property, for example, has gone up $200 a week in mortgage repayments. I asked the tenant for another $100, and there was outcry from the tenant. Well, it depends. What's the $100? Is that, like going from 300 to 400? Is that what it is? I guess it depends on your financial circumstances. $100, it's decent money. You can get, well, you can't get much anymore. Is that a third of a carton of smokes? Can you fill up a tank for 100? A hundy? Can you get it? I could probably get 2 Macca's meal boxes for the family. Trying to see what I could tie that into. $100 is some decent computer games. Although some of the newer ones are now coming over 100 Australian dollars. So, I mean, yeah, $100, it's a month's worth of internet if you want decent, fast speed. I negotiated with them and settled for $70 a week. I'm still down $130 a week, though, and that's just one property. I mean, I don't feel sorry for him. This is the idea of, shouldn't you be cash flow positive by the time you want to use these things to retire? Instead of having 12, maybe buy a few less, or maybe sell half of them and use those to decimate your mortgages and then just live off half the money. Wouldn't that be smarter? Unless you guess, I don't know. Look up the FIRE movement, or there's a new one, the poverty FIRE, like super povo FIRE. Financially independent, retire early. Well, he's retiring at a normal age. But you don't need that much money. Honestly, you do not need that much money to live a reasonably comfortable life here in Australia. You really don't. It's just if you don't want all the bells and whistles. People are commenting on my video I did a few days ago about how air conditioning, I would consider that a luxury. Okay, that's a luxury, and that's probably my upbringing. We had air conditioning in Victoria, but when we moved to Queensland, my father never wanted to spend the money to get it in. And I guess, the problem with air conditioning is everyone stays indoors. So on a really hot day, rather than opening the house, letting the wind go through and talking to your neighbors, everyone's just in their little insulated box with a machine running on the side. So I wonder if that actually has changed the relationships people form with their neighbors these days. There's an interesting investigation to undertake. But my point is that's a luxury item, and other people are going, how can you say it's a luxury item? So maybe that's just a class difference. I'm a POV. That's what it has to be, a proletarian. That's it, It's what happens when you go to public school, guys. Although they've all got AC now too. Anyway, let's keep going. Last month, the RBA Governor Philip Lowe was grilled by federal MPs over any further interest rate rises. Lowe was criticised over his comments, some of which he made as late as November 2021, suggesting the cash rate would remain at 0.1% until 2024. See, here's the thing. The RBA needs to start doing their own media press releases, their own media conferences, announcements, not just trickling this stuff out to the media or interviews, comments with other parties, because they were clear that this 2024 was conditional, but no one heard it. People only went with the headlines, although I guess most people only go with the headlines, or what Koshi says. From May, here's the thing. Okay, we can all be shitty. Oh no, they lied. It went up before 2024. Okay, it would have gone up in 2024, 12 months time. Would the same people be bitching and moaning then? Would it be any different? Okay, so come on. If you're not ready for it now, would you be ready for the rate increases in 2024? It's only a year. From last May, the bank has lifted the cash rate 10 successive times to 3.6%. Although I didn't really borrow money blindly based on what the Reserve Bank said, it did have an impact, Steve said. He did listen to them saying, we thought we were pretty safe until 2024. That is not the case. Well, then what would have happened to him in 2024? He's 70 years old. Is he buying these things all now or in the last few years? How did he get into this mess? I don't get it. I'm assuming, and perhaps I'm wrong, I'm assuming he's bought this portfolio of properties over his whole career. It sounds like he just bought them all at the death knell, you know? Shit, did he go all in at the end of his career? Retired, sold the business, put it all in property, borrowed for it all. Instead of buying 2 or 3, he bought 12. Is that it? Is it 12 properties? It is, isn't it? So is he just, he wants a better quality of life, or maybe to have a portfolio to pass on to the family. I've got no idea. If I knew the interest rates were going to be this high, I wouldn't have bought them, or wouldn't have bought the last few. Okay, so he stretched himself too far. Then sell them. Sell them. He's now surrounded by debt and is unable to receive the pension due to his extensive property portfolio. I mean, think about, bloody hell. It's only in Australia could the question be put forward how someone with 12 properties could still get the pension. Bloody hell. That's the Aussie way, guys. Between my wife and myself, I'll never get anything from the government because I've got assets, so I get nothing at all, he said. So what? You got 12 property, mate. What houses? Why do you need that? Why do you need the pension? Sell half of them. Get your debt down. Live off the rent of 6 of them. I worked hard all my life and went without a lot of things to try and have a decent retirement. And most importantly, not be a burden on taxpayers by funding my own retirement. Yeah, okay. It sounds like he's just put it all into property at the end, stretched himself too far, and is getting done by the interest rates. Hang on, what am I going? Oh, I just had an Autodesk crash. Awesome computers. The Property Investors Council of Australia chairman, Ben Kingsley, told 9news.com.au, there was no doubt landlords have been struggling. We've got this situation where we understand that the tenants are doing tough. It's a very tight rental market out there, he said. But there's obviously someone else in that conversation whose cost of holding that rental property has significantly grown, not only just in interest costs, but also significantly grown in terms of compliance costs being introduced by new regulations associated with looking after payments and looking after the properties. Well, that's what happens, guys. You got the government regulation. I mean, being a landlord isn't like an instant money cheat. I know that's how it's sold. I know the property bros tell you that, and it's all the same bullshit stories, but come on, talk to anyone who's done it for a while. You hear some horror stories. However, Kingsley did note that Stephen's situation was unique. Anyone who has made an investment decision assesses their risk and adjusted return on that investment decision. If it didn't go well for them, ultimately, they have to get themselves out of that decision. That responsibility will always fall on the individual or that household who are investing. For those people who have a significant investment portfolio, they may have to adjust the way in which they are operating to ensure they can survive. And here's rental prices. I mean, there you go. They've just skyrocketed all throughout the country. And they're going to get worse. They're going to get worse before they get better. Remember, immigration is returning. Labor's open the floodgates. And, well, reality is people want to come to Australia. It's a pretty awesome country, guys. As much as we all love to bitch and moan. So relief in sight. Lowe, the RBA boss, has signalled the central bank is closer to pausing interest rate hikes. This isn't relief. He's not going to get any relief from a pause in interest rate hikes. This guy's already stressed right now. Lowe addressed the Australian Financial Review's Business Summit this week and forecast some welcome news for mortgage holders with a pause in rate rises on the horizon. With monetary policy now in restrictive territory, we are closer to the point where it will be appropriate to pause interest rate increases to allow more time to assess the state of the economy. For Steve, however, something needs to change. He has his eye on selling some of his investment properties. I've always bought real estate. I've saved up deposits and stamp duty and bought them, but they have lots of mortgages on, he said. I had the longest one there for 20 years, and that is an investment property. It still has a mortgage on it, but I have no choice but to sell because I can't afford it. A single investment property was good, but I have bought a lot fairly recently. Okay, so crap. I'd bet money he sold out of his business, had a lot of cash, put it all into property, because that's all he knows. And that's the problem. Looking back, Steve admits he would do things differently and probably wouldn't have invested all of his savings into the property market, so he went all in. I think I should have started thinking a little more about superannuation, he said. I know a lot more now than I did, particularly capital gains tax and all that. But years ago, when I first bought these properties, it's the furthest thing from your mind. I wouldn't have bought the last few. The earlier ones, yes. But the last ones, now I wouldn't have. So there you go, guys. There you go. So, well, let's have a bit of a talk about this. 12 properties. I don't think anyone will feel sorry for him. He went all in. He went all in into one sector. I mean, isn't that the thing they teach you about investing, that you need to diversify your income streams, even property? Why didn't he have chuck a lot of it in some exchange traded funds, or an REIT or something, a real estate investment trust that has commercial or industrial properties that'll just pay you a monthly dividend, or even buy some bonds. Just sit there and let the monthly income come in. Yeah. Oh, well, the problem is that I think that's all in you. It's all in you and property. Can you see that? Someone in business just knowing about property here in Australia. Bugger. Anyway, see you next time, guys. Check out Heise Bim and Heise Does. If you want to support us, you can on YouTube, Patreon, or using our referral links, or call us if you need an architect. Take care, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode of HeiseSays. Thanks, everyone.